So?
No, you okay. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. October 12th, their dream came true. You never saw a happier crew. Indians, Indians, Columbus cried. His heart was filled with joyful pride. The first American? No, not quite, but Columbus was brave and he was bright. So in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And what was the outcome? You know, we all learned the poem when we were little. He discovered America. My first grade class, half of us kids dressed up as pilgrims and half of them dressed up as Indians, and we had our Thanksgiving feast together. But as sweet as this might be, that's not how it really was with the Indians and the Americans, or the non-Native Americans. According to Colin Calloway, an expert on American history, he suggests that the nation's history was for a long time written and taught as a single story, a narrative of nation-building and unending progress that united its diverse participants and created a single American experience. However, I would like to present to you that American history is more one of conquering and suppressing its diversity than a typical textbook suggests. The new perspective of American history is more one of conquering instead of discovering, and invading instead of discovering. So today, first I'll review what the typical textbook suggests is history, then what I believe and what some scholars are now believing is more the enlightened perspective, and finally how it's going to relate to you and me as modern Americans. So first, let's review what traditional and historical accounts refer to and describe as progress and pursuit of happiness, although the Indians tell a story of decline and suffering. The standard school teaches that Columbus discovered America, and that early colonists settled the wild, uninhabited forests of, the eastern coast of America. This view of history comes from centuries of mindset of manifest destiny and expansionist views. And manifest destiny is the idea that you have the God-given or authority, higher power gives you authority to take what you think is yours. The Europeans thought that no one else was in America, or the native people were savages, so they could just take whatever land they wanted. There were, however, according to Colin Calloway, over 40 different tribes and approximately 1.5 million Native Americans living in the northeastern region of North America during the 17th century. And he states that the building up of American frontier was a success story, celebrating the human triumphs made possible in a society based on principles of liberty and equality. And that's what people were teaching, and that's what a lot of people assume, like the settling in America, while it was a good thing, and we're obviously all products of that, it was a lot more than human triumphs and based on principles of liberty and equality. Liberty and equality weren't really in place in their conquering. And in my research on online databases like the Encyclopedia Britannica, almost all the articles about the American West or the settling in America were under the words expansion and not invasion. They were under expansion and exploration, which projects a positive portrayal of what happened. And James Polk, the former president, gave a speech reinterpreting laws of the time in favor of manifest destiny and the United States westward expansion. And he stated that we can never consent that European powers shall interfere to prevent such an expansion. And he didn't want the European, they were trying to lay a claim in the American West and Louisiana Purchase and things like that. But he didn't want them interfering, because that was the whole point of separating the American colonists coming, trying to break away from European powers. But now he was focusing more on, let us take the land, not you. And so instead of seeing American history as an expansion, I'd like to suggest that our history is more of an invasion, displacing Indians further and further west. The story of the Indians is usually portrayed as a futile resistance to the march of civilization. But we must remember that the creation of a nation typically means the destroying of another nation, of older civilizations. And expanding civilizations brings chaos and suffering to whatever civilization that is being conquered or pushed upon. And the History Channel takes the more recent approach in all its articles, movies on TV, videos. It concentrates on the destructive side of the European conquest, emphasizing the disastrous impact of the slave trade and ravages of imported disease on the indigenous people. And that's what happened to most of the Indians. If they weren't killed in like American Indian Wars, almost 90% of certain populations were wiped out by disease that the Europeans brought. And Columbus is no longer considered an honored discoverer among many scholars, but a deeply disturbed conquistador. So recognizing and studying the history of Indians means that the United States has to recognize invasion, racism, genocide against Indians, which is a hit to everyone's pride, and no one really wants to do it, but they're faced with those facts. So the history of America began long before 1492 or 1776, 1620, whatever date you want to choose. It began thousands of years before with the pre-contact Indians. And Indian activist and an expert on modern Indians, Richard Worsnop, argues that instead of honoring Columbus as a discoverer, most Indians, modern Indians, say he should be vilified for despoiling what he found. So while the past might not seem very relevant to you, I want to show you why studying the past of America and Indians can pave the way for a more successful future. And as a modern American, it's important to understand the history and cultures involved in the beginning of our nation, because the past really does influence the present and the future. And to be honest, you guys probably do more research into the colleges you want to attend or that guy or girl you want to date than you do into our nation's history. And 40 or 50 years ago, hardly any colleges offered courses in American Indian Studies, or even just their courses of American history were totally the expansionist view. But now you can major in it no problem, and it would be weird if a college didn't offer American Indian Studies. So that shows how the nation's perspective is evolving into a diverse, like not a single American experience, but it's including the Indians as well. And Indians, according to the modern Indian expert Richard Worsnop, are still fighting for respect among Americans, and this includes denouncing the use of Indians' names in professional and school sports teams. Like, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Canyon High School. They're the Canyon Comanches, and there probably won't be the Canyon Comanches in the near future. And Indians, according to Andrew Sherlin, the sociologist, Indians suffer from the nation's highest rates of divorce, out-of-wedlock births, and also substance abuse. And we have to understand that the oppression and almost the ignorance that we projected on the Indians is putting Indians on backwards track to stability. So the more we understand them, the more we accept that they're part of our history, we can all be on the same page. So I hope I've presented enough evidence for you to reconsider your thoughts about American history and how it involved Native Americans, both in the past and the present. And so despite centuries of expansionist history views and Columbus Day celebrations, which aren't bad things, but we just have to know the real Columbus, I want to present a new view of American history. It doesn't begin in 1492, like most elementary textbooks still teach, but thousands of years before in pre-contact Indian societies. Instead of discovering America, Columbus invaded it, and instead of settling wilderness, colonists displaced over 1 million Indians from their ancestral homelands. American history should be a shared experience between Native American Indians and non-Native Americans. While that experience involves years of suffering on the part of Indians, it's true, Americans should move forward and embrace the land and history that we now share.
All right, so Malika, what did you think?